Hi, Bob here. I just wanted to say that although we normally tape the show on Fridays, this week we taped on Thursday evening, and as a result, our discussion of the Twitter files does not include the Barry Weiss installment, which dropped about the time we pressed the record button. We'll cover that next week. I think this week's discussion is worthwhile in its own right, personally. And as long as I have your attention, if you like the Nonzero podcast, I encourage you to rate and review us. It makes a difference. If you don't like the podcast, never mind. Also, if you're watching on YouTube, smash the like button. That also makes a difference. Okay, enough promotional announcements and on with the show. Hey, Mickey.
Hey, Bob.
You're holding up a picture of, I can't see the head, so it's hard. It's somebody with arms and wearing a tie. It's still somebody I don't recognize. Who is that, Mickey? Also,
Bob?
Why are you dressed all in black? But one thing at a time, I guess. Oh, John Stennis, the Southern senator?
Right. And why is Senator Stennis famous?
Probably has to do with, I don't know, segregation or something.
You're probably right. But the second thing he's famous for is during Watergate, there were these incriminating tapes that Nixon had to deal with. And his solution was he had Stennis read them to see if there was anything incriminating, because he knew Stennis was too old and senile to actually catch anything.
Uh-huh.
And this was widely derided.
Twitter's. Have they asked you to read the Twitter documents? Has Elon called you in, inspired by the Stennis president?
They did one better, which is called the equivalent of Richard Nixon in Watergate to read the files. They had one of the guilty parties, one of their lawyers, James Baker, who was deeply enmeshed in all these FBI conspiracies, and he may have been sincere and well-meaning, but they were like get Trump projects to link him up with Russia. And he actually vetted the material that went to Matt Taibbi and Barry Weiss to see if there were if there was any wrongdoing in Twitter. So this is like asking Nixon to vet the Watergate tapes. It's everybody was saying, well, it's a nothing burger. There's not much to it. There's not as much as expected. They're gonna kill the Wikipedia entry for it. That's because Baker vetted it. Of course, it's a nothing burger. He wants it to be a nothing burger.
So you admit that so far it's a nothing burger.
It's not a nothing burger. It's a something burger, but it's not. It's it shows that there was some internal dissent. People saying we really can't pass this off as hack materials. What's going on? But you notice it was supplemented by actual interviews that Taibbi did with people. They supplemented the actual record from the emails, and I think they supplemented it because the emails weren't as damning as the reality was.
Wait, what? What was
Taibbi made phone calls. He didn't just read emails.
What are his disclosures beyond the nothing/something burger in the Twitter files themselves?
Well, he just reports a summary. He says, the Twitter people were worried. They thought it was that the justifications didn't match, which they didn't. They didn't match the case, and they had no grounds for censoring it. But that nobody had the balls to stop it, and that it was all done by.
Well, I mean, they did stop it within 48 hours, and there was still like 2.5 weeks left in the campaign. So, I mean, in fact, I hadn't realized that. I had always thought that Twitter went too far, but now I realize they didn't go as far as I thought they'd gone.
They were they went far. They went so far as to block Trump's press secretary from linking to it, which was unbelievable.
Well, they blocked everyone from linking to it for 48 hours.
Well, I think they took special measures with her. I think they froze her account or something.
Okay.
As in the mass ecosystem, Twitter is only part of it. Although, when you block something right at the beginning, that kills it more than if you blocked it for 2 days after you let it get some traction.
Oh, there are some people arguing that the Streisand effect generated by the Twitter blockage actually outweighed that. But
they were part of this carapace, which the story was shut down by basically all media except the New York Post. I don't know. Did Fox even carry it? I guess they must have. But
Well, the Wall Street Journal did a piece. I mean, I think honestly,
no.
Yeah, they did.
They did, but the piece pissed on it.
Well, whatever. I'm just saying they covered it.
The theory there is that the New York Post story killed a big journal piece that they were planning. It actually hurt Trump because the journal would have carried more weight. And later, a few weeks later, I think after the election, they came up with a much more thorough piece that had the 10% for the big guy quoted in it, an interview with Bobulinski that was really damning. It was too late then.
The Wall Street Journal piece?
Yeah, there were two Wall Street Journal pieces, I think. There was an early piece that reflected a command decision by Murdoch. We're not going to give this thing air. And they clamped down on it and said, we haven't found any wrongdoing, go away. And then they came up with a second piece a month later that said, well, now we've interviewed Mr. Bobulinski, and it looks like Biden was on the take. Okay?
You mean that was after the election?
Pretty sure, yeah.
Well, what I remember is one before the election that wasn't what I thought was reasonably responsible. I mean, they were what it said was basically there's no smoking gun here, which I think is still the case. I mean, we've had this argument. We don't need to go back. There were suggestive things that you would want to follow up, but there was no like smoking gun. This is corruption. This is illegal. I think the
10% for the big guy is a smoking gun.
Well, we've had this argument, but that deal never went down, A. And B, we don't know if the big guy, assuming it was Biden, even knew about that email suggesting that. And so, it never materialized. And I don't know.
Look, I don't care about it that much, even if it's true. Okay.
Yeah.
I care about it. This is a media story and the press conspiring to censor people when it shouldn't censor them. Whether it was 2 days or 2 weeks, they shouldn't do it. It reflects a mindset that the media was 100% for Trump and was doing anything 100% against Trump and was doing anything, including violating tenets of free speech, not the First Amendment, but free speech, to get there. And that tells us a lot about the media bias and what conservatives are up against.
I mean, first of all, in case there's anybody who doesn't know what we're talking about, it's this question of how Twitter, Matt Taibbi, who was, I guess, anointed by Elon Musk as one of two journalists who he wants to do publicity, do publicity for him on this. I don't want to be too uncharitable in the way I characterize the roles, but on disclosing what exactly happened inside Twitter.
He was doing the investigating. He wasn't doing publicity.
Okay, but the weird thing is, I mean, I actually have respect for Taibbi. I've always agreed with his basic critique of the media, but I will say it's very odd for him to say, there are some conditions Elon imposed that I agreed to. I can't tell you about them now. Is he? I think he's going to tell us about them or something.
I don't know. That was weird too.
That's
but the basic thing is
weird.
The basic thing is weird. They got flummoxed by Baker. I mean, they were handed an envelope apparently by a lawyer from Musk.
Okay, but wait, this is before the Baker thing. Can we address the issue I'm raising? This is before they knew about that Baker was involved in this. Here are my issues with the way Taibbi is handling this. And again, I've always thought highly of him. In fact, you've been more critical of him in the past, but now that he's on Team Elon, you're on Team Taibbi. Of his kind of style of newsletter, I think you have. Maybe in the
I think he goes on and on and on, yeah.
But the other thing is he has a little bit of a hyperbolic style that can possibly be justified by the fact that he's kind of the heir. When he was at Rolling Stone, he was kind of Hunter Thompson's heir in a certain sense, right? It was a different kind of hyperbole. But the way it shows up here is like his third tweet in this tweet thread is, the Twitter files tells an incredible story from inside one of the world's largest and most influential social media platforms. It is a Frankensteinian tale of a human-built mechanism grown out of the control of its designer. Well, you didn't deliver on that in this first thread, okay? Maybe you will, but I would calibrate my billing a little more carefully, just as a little piece of advice about.
He overbilled it in the first three tweets.
Okay, he did that.
That's not a very vicious critique.
I think I'm not trying to be vicious. I'm saying these are my three critiques. Okay. there's the weird fact that it's like, well, Elon imposed some conditions on me. Now, I'm guessing they're pretty innocent. Like Elon said, you got to break the story on Twitter, can't be on your Substack. But if it's that, why not just tell us? Whatever it is, why not just tell us? Was one of the conditions that you can't talk about the conditions? What's going on here? I mean, this is really weird. And it's probably going to turn out to be nothing if we ever find out what it was. But it's weird.
It'll be worse.
Why would he
worse if he never? It would be worse if there were the conditions and he never even said there were conditions.
Yeah, but it wouldn't be nearly as good as saying to Elon, look, I'm going to have to tell people there were conditions, and that's going to do so much damage to my credibility. You should just let me tell them what the conditions are. I can't wait to find out what's behind this. The third complaint I have is that he says, and by the way, I like Elon seems to have failed to actually read the thread. You saw the part where Elon says, the problem here is the government was applying the pressure to Twitter. Well, no, Biden hadn't been elected president, Elon. And in fact,
well, no, but the argument is that the FBI and the deep state applied the pressure.
Well, they haven't shown that. They haven't shown that.
That's why they didn't deliver on the Frankensteinian giant.
Okay, well, Elon was saying they had shown that when they hadn't shown it.
Okay, so what? But then he corrected it.
But Mickey, this is the guy.
Stars, they're just like us. He reads it, he fucks up, he corrects it. That's very human of him.
But this isn't just another little issue of my Substack. This guy bought Twitter saying, I am the person who can turn this into a free speech platform, and he's not doing any fucking homework here. He doesn't have any idea.
He has other things to do.
What?
That seems completely trivial. Are
you kidding?
He changed his mind. Everybody jumped on it for it, and he issued another tweet saying, it's much worse if it's the government. No,
not just much worse. It's a violation of the First Amendment. This is important, Mickey. That was what he was saying.
I'm not sure it's a violation.
It's a violation of the First Amendment.
I'm not sure it's a violation of the First Amendment. It satisfies the state action requirement of the First Amendment. But if the classic example is New York Times versus the Ellsberg, the Ellsberg Pentagon Papers case. Okay, the New York Times wants to publish these documents from the Pentagon that were I don't know if they were leaked. They were taken by Daniel Ellsberg. I guess they were leaked, and they wanted to publish to the government. The government says no, we don't want you to publish. Okay, if Twitter, if the New York Times had said yes, the way Twitter did, okay, we won't publish. That's not a violation of the First Amendment. They've willingly accepted it, and poor Ellsberg, who's the real victim here, gets screwed. The First Amendment doesn't save him. Okay, he's the author who's been suppressed. The First Amendment doesn't save him.
Well,
so if the FBI had gone to Twitter and Twitter did just what they did, it would not be a violation of the First Amendment.
Elon should hire you as well as Matt Taibbi. But what he said was that what makes this a free speech issue, clearly in the constitutional sense, is that it was the government. That's what he thought. And turns out he hasn't even shown government influence.
No, it's a free speech issue, even if it's not the government. Free speech doesn't have to be the government.
No, I'm saying
if you have a private monopoly that censors speech, that's a free speech issue.
That's your view. I keep telling you should write the op-ed about how Twitter is tantamount to the government.
No, semantically, it's a free speech issue. Free speech is not the First Amendment.
Anyway, Mickey,
the First Amendment values applied in a larger scale.
Look, Elon should have said all the things you're saying, but the reason he didn't say them is because he doesn't know them. He thought he was making a critical distinction between government suppression of speech and something else. And he was wrong because he hasn't shown a government role.
Maybe he was thinking of the FBI getting involved, and he wasn't thinking of the FBI getting involved enough to know that he should have fired Baker day one.
I'm just saying
he's not completely on top of things. I agree with that.
This is just
on the other hand, he's more on top of things than Jack was, the previous owner, because Jack apparently had nothing to do with his most important decision they'd made all year.
Well, I wasn't a fan of Jack.
Then he comes back in and says, oh, this was the wrong decision. Let's reverse it.
Look, I've been critical of Jack. But the third thing about Taibbi is he says, look, the truth is, so he shows us this screenshot of an email in which somebody at Twitter says to somebody else at Twitter, These links just came in from the Biden campaign, and somebody says, okay, I've dealt with these, the 3 links. And by the way, you know what the 3 links were to?
They were to dick pics, Bob.
Right. They were things that clearly violated Twitter's
right.
rules. Okay,
I agree.
So,
that's one of the reasons the release was a disappointment. It did not show them the detail, the granular detail did not involve squelching the big story. It involved squelching the little dick pic angle.
But I have another complaint, which is that Taibbi said, and by the way, they also honored Trump campaign requests like this. He says that, great, he says it. But because he doesn't provide a comparable screenshot where they've got, this from the Trump campaign and somebody saying, okay, I'm on it, then Team Blue doesn't have this big meme they can send around on Twitter for propaganda purposes. Team Red does. Okay.
And I'm sad. That's so upsetting.
Mickey,
he probably didn't have the pic of the Trump takedown.
Mickey, the point is this whole thing is being orchestrated and run by the guy who owns Twitter and says he's going to turn it into this wonderful town square. Okay. He needs to be held to that standard. Again, if you're commissioner of the NFL, you shouldn't be loading the dice in the favor of one team. And that's the job he signed up for. He told us he was going to do a great job and clean it up. And he doesn't even have the attention span to figure out what's in this goddamn thread that he's so proud of.
Well, he didn't review the documents himself. He farmed it out to Taibbi and Barry Weiss.
Yeah, but he could have read the thread. I'm not saying he should have gone through a document. He could have read the thread that he was talking about.
Oh, there's 39 tweets in the thread. He's got a rocket to put on the moon.
He's a busy man. So,
I don't. This seems like, if you were playing baseball, this would be a single. It's not a big critique of Musk. He's basically moving in the right direction. His big fuck up was not firing Baker when he showed up. He let Richard Nixon stay on the payroll and review the tapes. It's insane. He finally, when he learned about it, he fired him.
He didn't know.
But there actually is a tweet exchange with the controversial Mike Cernovich, where Cernovich talks about Baker and Musk tweets, sounds bad. Okay, so this is like a month earlier, maybe even before he Bennett. He had been told about Baker. He probably forgot it.
He's a busy man. Look, and maybe now that Baker's gone, they'll go back and find stuff. And look,
unless Baker deleted them with bleach bits so that they can never be found again.
They would be able to figure that out because he's probably not technically sophisticated.
You would think. He worked for the FBI.
Well, as I said, he's probably not technically sophisticated. So there's round 2 coming. It was supposed to come right away, and maybe he'll have more. I'm just saying, so far, I don't think they're handling this well. I don't think Taibbi is handling it as well as he could.
The problem is they now have to go back to installment number 1 and see what they left out of installment number 1. And the larger point is this is revealing because it shows the completely thoroughgoing pro-democratic bias of Twitter. And the big impact it had was not in squelching the Hunter Biden laptop story, which might have affected the election. It was a close election, probably not. There were reasons to be suspicious of it at the time. The big reason not to be suspicious of it was that Biden did not deny that it was Hunter's laptop. That was the big glaring green light. But it's the general bias on Twitter if he is suppressing conservatives in general. 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, 1 million conservatives get squelched and 1 million liberals get boosted.
Do you have evidence? Do you have evidence?
No, but if that's happening, that's the big story that they're driving.
Oh yeah, and if Jack Dorsey was running a child porn ring, that's a big story. But why don't we wait until we see some evidence?
Well, we're waiting for the evidence. We're waiting for installment.
Yeah, I know.
2.
I just don't understand why you're acting as if we have. Yeah, that would be big. That would be big.
I don't act as if this is a huge smoking gun. I said I acted as if Baker had fucked it up. That was my opening spiel.
The sense that I get is, from what I've seen, first of all, they did, for those 48 hours when they were scrambling. And I understand the initial panic, right? Because remember, with Hillary, this shit hit, DNC hack, Comey letter hits late, all of, and so on. I understand they're thinking like, what do we do? This could alter the election. They spent 48 hours doing it.
Our guy might lose.
They actually, well, yeah, that was what I'm sure some of them were feeling. They were overwhelmingly Democratic. No doubt about that. I'm just saying it wasn't, even if they hadn't had that sensibility, that leaning, it wouldn't have been a crazy reaction. They had this kind of plausible reason that because to suppress it, in the sense that they did have a rule about hacked materials. And it was a reasonable surmise, even if you believe the emails.
I think it was a recently produced rule about hacked materials, but maybe I'm wrong.
No, it was already there. It was, you can tell.
It was definitely already there, but had been there for 2 months or 2 years. The FBI had been meeting with them saying, there are going to be a lot of hacked leaks, maybe some involving Hunter Biden.
Well, anyway, they had that rationale on the books. That's what they resorted to. It kind of made sense at the time. And in fact, even if you bought the laptop version of the story, as opposed to the hacked version, it's kind of stolen information. So I see.
No, it's not stolen information. It was in the rightful possession of the computer shop owner.
I don't know what the law is on that, but so anyway,
and I should say it had been in the possession of the FBI for a year, so the FBI knew that it was legit, and yet their agents still went and warned about a coming Hunter Biden hit. They didn't say it would be a laptop, but they actually, they said there's going to be a coming Hunter Biden hit, and obviously the Hunter Biden hit that happened, they knew was bogus.
That's a scandal about the FBI. Yeah, that's not a scandal about Twitter.
Well, Musk allowed to expose scandals about the FBI too.
Sure, I'm just talking about Twitter right now, and that was his claim, is that I'm going to blow this fucking place wide open, and he hasn't done it yet, and he may.
The night is young.
I will say the bigger scandal so far, from what I've seen about what Twitter really did, is the fact that the New York Times never even wrote about it. Because if they had done, I don't think they did. Right? Did they write a single piece? Did the Washington Post write a single piece? They had a couple
of paragraphs in a piece about something else.
Yeah, well, that's not enough. It was a legit story.
Yeah,
and I would say, in defense of us, if you recall, in our podcast, before everyone was acknowledging the emails were real, we were agreeing. You and I were agreeing these look like they're really emails. I'm not sure whether the laptop story or it's a hack or what, but it doesn't look like Russian disinformation.
Yeah. Did we say that?
Yes,
good for us. I had the same misgivings. He has Rudy Giuliani. He won't reveal. He won't reveal it to everybody. He only shows it to a few people. It's a crazy story about this blind computer repairman. And could Hunter Biden really be that crazy to leave his laptop and not pick it up? It was all wacky, but the two key points are, first, in trying to figure out if it's real or not, Biden did not deny it was Hunter's laptop. Okay, that's why they had to go to the hacked materials thing. They couldn't go to the made up materials thing. The second thing is, it's Twitter. Is your idea of Twitter that, oh my God, if something is bad, we have to squelch it? Or is the idea Twitter is 2 billion people, they can figure it out amongst themselves and they can assess it themselves? And obviously their attitude is, we have to squelch it. Oh my God, it might affect the election, which I don't think was the right attitude.
So what else happened? We've actually spent a shocking amount of time on this. And our timing, as usual, is bad. These things hit like as we were taping last week. But
the Baker thing happened a few days later.
Yeah, the Baker thing. So we await the next installment, and they may blow the place apart. It could happen.
I think it's going to take a while, because they're going to have to go and try to reconstruct all the files that Baker deleted.
But it sounded like Taibbi had a second batch anyway. Go ahead and give us that. He thinks he has some news waiting for us, so give us that, and then maybe supplement it.
Is that what I would do? I don't know what I would do if I were him. I would be so pissed off that I would try to track down what Baker did first.
Well, I would try to find the Frankenstein tale of a human-built mechanism growing out of the control of its designer. I would try to document that.
That was a Hunter Thompson lead.
Well, but the thing is, it wasn't. It wasn't. Hunter Thompson, it was always clear that the hyperbole was a joke. Like when he said, I was on deadline, I locked myself up with a case of wild turkey and enough speed to alter the outcome of 6 Super Bowls. That was a joke. It was only 1 Super Bowl.
I guess that's I guess that you're right. Even the vampire squid sucking the something, that was sort of Hunter Thompson as hyperbole. It was slightly making fun of itself.
Yeah.
And this did not come across as making fun of itself at all. Good point.
So quick Ukraine update.
Sure. And I had a point I wanted to make. A
About
minor
this?
point, an obvious point. No, about Ukraine, but go ahead.
Well, go ahead. Do you have an obvious point?
No, you do the update, and then we'll get to my point. My point's not that good.
First of all, that Russia is building so many defensive lines along the battle line or slightly before it that it's acquired a name. It's called the Surovikin line. That's what the Russians are calling it. He's the new guy who's been heading up the command. He was appointed right before they started doing the infrastructure strikes. His nickname, ominously, has long been General Armageddon. So I don't know. I mean, if I were Russians, I'd be haunted by the resonance with, Maginot line. But anyway, the Russian Twitter, there's a lot of pessimism. Like, I mean, there is an expectation that they will try to venture beyond the Surovikin line in places and take more of the Donbass and so on. But I'm sensing a lot of pessimism.
I'm colored by an article I read in Foreign Affairs, which you may have read too, about how all the Miller bloggers and a bunch of, I think, Russian journalists who were embedded with the troops were all pissing on Putin and the strategy and how awful it is. And somehow he's bought them all off. They've stopped doing that. And he's bought them all off mainly by appointing this General Armageddon you talk about.
Yeah.
And they sort of like him. And so that he has a new lease on life. And he's also bought them off by letting the military take over a larger chunk of the economy. So I'm surprised that you say the Miller bloggers are pessimistic, because according to this Foreign Affairs thing, they were furious before and they're not furious anymore.
I'm not talking about them so much as kind of a couple of Russia Twitter people, and only a couple. And one of them just seems congenitally pessimistic. He just took a deep dark turn. He's this guy. What is it, Carlin? Meanwhile, Ukraine sent these drones deep into Russia. A couple of them attacked airfields 300 miles into Russia, one airfield 100 miles from Moscow. Biden administration hastened to distance themselves from it. They basically said, we didn't have anything to do with this, A. And then B, they immediately leaked this story to the Wall Street Journal about how they had actually altered these HIMARS launchers they sent to make sure that even if Ukraine got a hold of the longer range missiles, they wouldn't be able to launch them from the launchers. So I guess they're worried about this leading to escalation. And of course, Ukraine, if you define escalation as NATO getting into it, Ukraine welcomes that. As Zelensky has made clear, we don't welcome it. So there's a difference of opinion on that.
Blinken's statement was somewhat lawyerly. Did he say that we had no knowledge of it?
I can find it in a second if you want to get back to it.
It didn't strike me as, oh my God, we were shocked and we hated this attack.
Well, no, you don't say that. But if you come out and say anything that distances you at all in a situation like this from an ally, that's notable. I can find it in just a second.
That's not worth it. It's not worth it.
So anyway, I think the big question is, which way does the psychological effect go? You can imagine, I guess what Ukraine wants is Blinken said we have, quote, neither encouraged nor enabled, unquote, the attacks. I mean, that's noteworthy.
So he could have known they were going on and did nothing to stop them.
I doubt he could have. But I think we certainly weren't enthusiastic about it. I mean, I think the big question is the psychological effect. I guess Ukraine is hoping that Russians will turn on Putin and say, you got us into this fucking war. Now you can't even protect us from the blowback. But, it could work the other way where Putin, makes the Russians feel like our homeland is threatened by this war, and there's a rally around the flag effect.
I think that's his whole pitch now, is we're in a long-term struggle for our survival against the people who hate us. It's not so much as it's going to be a quick operation, a special operation that's going to be over soon, and you won't even feel a thing.
Yeah, they're setting up territorial defense units in a couple of Russian oblasts as if there's the actual threat of a land invasion. It's hard to believe Putin actually thinks there is one, but he may. In any event, he may think it's useful to have people think that. And
there on one of these terrible NPR shows, they had an interview with Khrushchev's daughter, who was in Moscow, and actually is a fairly sensible, smart person from what I could hear. And she said, "Look, Putin actually is desperate to end the war. He wants to end the war. He's looking for a way out, but he will not do it unless he can claim victory." And she said she also said that Biden's early rhetoric about, we're going to take Putin out was counterproductive to this negotiation. And it made me think of the Chris Hayes point, which is, if you are really exercised by the Russian war crimes and think the war crimes have been lopsidedly Russian, which I assume they have been, you need humiliation. Anything that lets Putin claim any kind of victory is not enough of a defeat to discourage war crimes in the future. So that's where the dividing line is between the two sorts of negotiations. If you want a negotiation peace, you have to give up on the humiliation and give Putin some fig leaf. And I guess that is the debate between you and the Hayeses of the world. Am I wrong?
Oh, I don't know. There's a big debate between me and the Hayeses of the world. I mean, you're referring to a tweet of his that was just a reply to somebody who tweeted about my Washington Post op-ed piece. So it was his comment on my op-ed piece. And I DM'd with him a little about it. And I'm not sure how big a divergence there is there. But I mean, you're right. The problem is both sides, as usual, for political reasons, really, really, really want not to admit defeat. And that's why, as I said last week, if there's a near-term end to the war, it's weirdly, I can kind of imagine Ukraine becoming part of NATO, because it's a way for Putin to hang on to the land, or most of this land, and say, see, I brought these Russian-speaking parts of Ukraine under our umbrella, most of them, many of them. These were the people who were being, discriminated against and even killed before I did this. And Ukraine, but Ukraine, meanwhile, can say, hey, we're in NATO now. This is exactly what you didn't want.
I don't.
It's the only way for them. The other thing is, it's hard to imagine an arrangement that makes them feel secure short of that.
You've gone over to the other side. I don't.
I'm not necessarily.
The whole point of the war was NATO, and Putin was terrified of NATO. How is he suddenly going to accept NATO on his doorstep? I don't think he is. I think that's more than Putin can swallow. There's no way for him to claim victory if that happens.
Well, what's he going to do? First of all, I mean, he's doing the best he can at fighting right now, and he doesn't seem to be able to advance the line. I mean, the worrisome thing about this,
well, he may be in a pickle.
One worrisome thing about them doing this is it would raise the issue of Georgia, and Georgia might start feeling its oats. Now, Georgia is not nearly as sensitive as the Ukraine issue is for Putin, but it would become another incendiary thing. I
guess if he's desperate to end it, he'll settle for a fig leaf. That will work if he actually looks at the situation before the war and after the war. Do you think he'd happily trade a bit of territory for NATO? I don't think so.
Depends on how desperate he is to end it. I don't know. The other thing is, you might have under the table agreements to subsequently, for the U.S. and Russia to subsequently come to terms about moving missiles further away from his border than they are now. Moving them as close as they are was a mistake to begin with, and so on.
Here's a hypothetical, which may be so crazy it's not worth asking, but here goes. If we could win so decisively that it humiliates Putin, would that be a good outcome would you be happy with that happening?
In other words, roll all the way back to
roll them all the way back, kick every last Russian out of Ukraine, set up impermeable perimeters, and Putin just has to take the L.
Well, it's not the humiliation that would accept me from taking the L that would bother me, or him taking the L. It's the risk of escalation, either into a Europe-wide war, or even a nuclear war. Now, that probably wouldn't happen, but when you're talking nuclear war, increasing the chances from 3% to 5% is, in my view, unacceptable. Right. Talking about all-out nuclear war.
I agree with that. But take that off the table, I still wouldn't do it, because the consequences in Russia are so unpredictable.
Well, there's that too. It's like the idea that this is going to usher in, nirvana in Russia is not consistent with recent experience about regime change. So, right. It's a total Pandora's box.
The neocons who are behind the sort of humiliate Putin seem to really have this idea that you can integrate Russia into the Western economy and it'll all be okay and they'll be just like us. Very similar to this idea that we can bring people from all over the world and they'll instantly assimilate into America. They're just like us.
Well, and that's just not true. Sad thing is, there was a time when we could have done that. We just in the entire history of humankind, I wonder how many systematically bad policies there have been that ranked with our management of the Russia relationship since the 90s.
When could we have done it? I believe you, but when could we have done it?
Oh, Putin very much wanted. In the first look, he didn't invade a country until 2008. And if you go back and look at the early parts of the Bush administration, he is begging for a whole new kind of relationship. And Bush continues to humiliate him. We're getting out of the ABM treaty, even though you begged us not to.
But he's not going to be part of the EU. I mean, the EU can't even tolerate Hungary. They're not going to tolerate Russia. I mean, in terms of interference in democracy and interference in the political economy and the corruption and the rule of law.
He doesn't have to be in the EU to be peacefully integrated into the world, which is what they wanted.
He clearly likes to have control over the economy and to tell which billionaires, oh, you're going to jail, you're going to succeed.
Well, that's none of our fucking business. That's the problem. Get out of the mindset that we get to manage the internal politics of every country in the world.
So that's integrating people in a way that is not what I meant by integrating. I meant that they become a normal Western economy which trades with everybody else.
And liberal democracy and everything's wonderful. That's the mindset that got us into the mess we're in.
That's not my mindset.
Probably going to lead to war with
the mindset I'm critiquing. You're saying there was a halfway house that integrated them enough into the Western economy that he would be happy.
By integration, I mean extensive economic engagement. You buy a lot of stuff from us. We buy a lot of stuff from you.
And you think that would stop his imperial aspirations? He'd
Totally.
still be worried.
I mean, look, the delicate issue was Ukraine's relationship to the EU, and that would have taken creativity. It wasn't just NATO. That was an issue that required delicacy.
And
but we
Russia
didn't try
is integrated,
anything approaching delicacy.
If Russia is integrated, Ukraine is certainly going to be even more integrated, and that's going to set him off.
Well, that was the issue in 2014. As I said, it would have taken delicacy. What did we do? Instead, we just let Victoria Nuland pursue her neocon agenda. Yeah. And the rest is history.
I think, good point. I think similarly, there must be some creative solution to the NATO problem. In other words, they don't become, under your solution, they don't become a full-fledged member of NATO. They get NATO's security guarantee somehow, but they remain sort of formally outside of NATO, and they don't get all the privileges of NATO. They don't get all the arms we would otherwise give them. They're sort of a partially demilitarized. I mean, you can be creative. You can slice the tomato, hundreds of different ways. Maybe one of them will appeal to Putin.
Yeah, but if we give them a security guarantee, I mean, they've already got the weapons and the training. I mean,
that's okay. So that's
what's left. I mean, that's what NATO consists of.
Well, that's a fig leaf. Then maybe Putin wants a fig leaf. Maybe he wants to say they're not full NATO members. They're not really part of NATO. They just have the security guarantee.
Yeah, maybe. Oh, look, I'm just thinking outside the box. I have no idea. Probably
I applaud this.
won't.
I'm just saying.
You're
now. I'm less of a neocon than you are on this issue.
I'm not advocating this, Mickey.
Okay.
I'm just saying when I think about the logic of this, how it plays out, it's, I think we should pursue peace negotiations if they're pursuable and see what's gettable. And it may be something other than this. I'm just saying that this is one place. If there were a near-term solution, this is one thing I can. It's just not that easy to imagine things that are acceptable to both sides and make both sides feel secure. And you may be right that NATO membership for Ukraine makes Russia feel too insecure, but it also could be that we reach other deals about missile placement and so on that lets Putin declare victory.
There's sort of three big issues that sort of hit the zeitgeist this week. One is that everybody's talking about negotiations. You played a part in that. Elon Musk played a part in that. David Sachs played a part in that. But somehow everybody is now more acceptable. It used to, 2 months ago, if you mentioned negotiations, you're a Putin stooge. Okay, that's not happening anymore. Everybody's talking about negotiations, and it doesn't make you a Putin stooge to talk about negotiations.
That's the sound of our alarm, but go ahead.
They're trying to figure it out. Okay, well, the two other things we could talk about in the Parrot Room. One is the least interesting one is the fate of Trump. And the third thing that hit is AI. AI hit in a huge way with this text generator.
Yep.
And everybody is now assuming basically that all their jobs are going to be rendered obsolete by AI. It's like when they cloned the sheep Dolly. It was controversial for like a second and a half, and then everybody said, "Oh yeah, well this is the future. They're going to be cloning everything. It's just a fundamental change in humanity." So, accept it. People and like AI, people are approaching the Dolly stage where they're not DALI, but DOLLY. The Dolly stage, well, sure, they're going to be cloning everything. Sure, everything's going to be run by AI.
But the cloning never happened, right? Did I miss
It's true that it hasn't really, it has happened in agriculture in a big way.
There's still your mogul of sperm plan, but that's different.
It hasn't happened with humanity. It has happened with cows.
Okay.
And they've tried it with horses. I told you that.
Yeah.
They've tried it with horses, and the horses that they clone are not the same. They clone champion horses, and the champion horses that they clone, the clones do not have the will to win that the champions do, and they don't do well.
It's all about agency.
It's about agency and gaslighting.
So what else can we talk about in the Parrot Room? I mean, in terms of other things this week, of course, there is a Warnoff victory, which makes me feel better.
There's the Bob victory.
My
Finally
victory?
has some way to impress his wife, which we'll talk about.
Me?
Yeah.
That would be great. Well, and you know what it is and I don't?
Yes, you know what it is too.
Not sure I do.
Okay, well, we'll find out in the Parrot Room.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Also, I'm going to bring up a J.D. Vance quote to torment you with.
Shame me. Okay.
And the latest allegation against SBF, Sam Bankman-Fried. I just read about it in the business section of the Times.
One of our readers had a very good point about SBF, which I want to bring up. I'll do that. The demise of BuzzFeed. I guess we won't spend a lot of time mourning about that.
Listen, I got to say, your vendetta against Ben Smith is totally out of control. Okay, because already it was the reason you spent so much time demanding that Semaphore, Ben's new company, return the money that it got from SBF. But this week,
it's a point I would ordinarily have made, but in a tweet, I wouldn't have gotten off my ass to write a blog item about it.
But this week, in reference to BuzzFeed, which was, of course, the periodical in which Ben's, shall we say, unflattering profile of you appeared, which gave rise to the vendetta, its stock price has been going down, and you tweeted all about that. And I'm not sure you realize.
Bob. It was a tweet.
Still, it was a vendetta tweet. And the funny thing is, if anything, it's flattering. The stock price has dropped since he left it, since Ben Smith left.
Well, maybe it was a pro-Ben Smith tweet. It didn't mention Ben Smith. It just said, I think Twitter was a nefarious, an ill influence on America anyway. and I'm happy that it goes broke. Okay.
Totally a vendetta tweet.
Okay. Can I have a vendetta against BuzzFeed that doesn't involve Ben Smith and the size of my apartment?
You can, but I think you should pursue your vendettas with the kind of steely discipline with which I pursue mine.
It's like Salon. It's like Salon. We had a no gloat rule that we couldn't gloat when Salon went broke. It hasn't gone broke. It's still there. Okay. You got to gloat when you can. You can't wait till it collapses completely before you gloat.
No, you need to have more discipline and wait for the moment when you can undermine your rivals.
But
like,
Bob,
you know, like Leon Wieseltier thinks he's safe right now. Okay. Let me just say, you know, I've got this.
I have a reasonably good track record at having my rivals completely be destroyed, not by me. And I think it's because I pick really good
self-destructive rivals.
Self-destructive rivals like
Jeffrey Toobin,
Chris Bangle, the head of BMW styling.
Yeah.
I guess Howell Raines, self-destructive.
I have an issue with him.
Anyway, I guess Ron Burkle was also in, but I now can no longer remember why I had a vendetta against him. So if
you forgive him,
I wouldn't. He must be doing something right.
Folks, this is a mere taste of what's in the Parrot Room. Let me tell you what else is. Okay, so this new allegation against SBF I want to talk about. I want to briefly talk about the worst issue of a Substack newsletter ever. I want to adjudicate a grievance against Mickey that I have. You can always turn these over to the commenters in the Parrot Room, and they will rule usually fairly, I find. And one thing they've been adjudicating is my complaint about Elon Musk's gun tweet. So we'll see what they had to say about that.
Is it that I was 10 minutes late and put you in a feisty mood, which is how we started?
It's more complicated than that. 10 minutes late. That's good for you. There are special circumstances prevailing today.
Right. Correct.
I mean, by the way, it's surprising that I've been this energetic because it's now 9 p.m. my time since we had to accommodate your busy social calendar.
That's lunchtime for me, but yes, okay.
So, but we'll get into all this. We'll get into all this, and there's a nominee for Parrot Room theme song. There's now 2 nominees. We'll get into
the third nominee.
No, but there's the one.
There are 2 nominees
that we haven't talked about in the Parrot Room.
I've heard them both.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we will play at least.
We'll have some musical content, and also there was what seemed to be a very important study from the Federal Reserve, somebody on the Federal Reserve, about why men are dropping out of the labor force, mainly non-college educated men. And you can guess which of Mickey's hobby horses it hit. It hit 2 of them, Bob. We can talk about that.
Let's save it for the end because the child tax credit has a way.
Yeah, I know, because it's subsidy. It doesn't have to do with child tax credit.
Oh.
This is how Bob squelches me by pushing me to the end. And the other thing is there's an anti-Twitter column by the world's finest columnist, Janan Ganesh, which I disagree with, but it was so well written and so completely, what's the word?
Unpersuasive.
Disruptive. The word it was so disruptive and something you would normally not say that I think we should talk about it.
Well, these days that's the ticket to stardom. Say things you wouldn't say.
What is the word? The word I keep forgetting for when something is
not
undermining.
Subversive?
No, there's some hip, like PC word for. Wow, it's like 20 years old.
That's too recent for us.
Okay.
Okay. So patreon.com/Parrot Room is where the frivolity will unfold, even at this late hour, even without any caffeine remaining in my system.
Thank you, Bob.
You're welcome. You're welcome. All right. See you there.